Welcome to the news. Government says that the panic buying of meal in Muzi district, Southern Province, is stage managed. And the Zambia National Farmers Union, ZNFU, has opposed government's decision to reintroduce price controls of maize. Welcome to the news. The Disaster Management and Mitigation Unit, DMMU National Coordinator in the Office of the Vice President, Chanda Kawe, says that the panic buying of meal in Muzi district, Southern Province, is staged managed. According to a statement released by First Secretary, Press and Tourism, at the Zambian mission in India, Bangwe Navili, Mr. Kabwe says government will not tolerate political players that incite people with a view of showing the rest of the world that things in Zambia are out of control. The DMMU National Coordinator says government is aware of the scheme to create a bad impression of the country, adding that architects will face the wrath of the law. Mr. Kabwe says government is distributing 100 metric tons of meal every month in all affected provinces, including Muzi. He says that meal was on Saturday, August 24, 2019, distributed in Nega in Muzi district. The DMMU National Coordinator says a week ago, himself and the Minister in the Office of the Vice President, Honorable Oli Papiri, oversaw feeding of livestock in the same district. Mr. Kabwe says a story recently emerged from Muzi that government was giving maize bran or stock feed for human consumption when in fact it was meant for livestock, as grazing land has dried up in Southern Province. He has since called on all well-meaning Zambians not to panic as government is responding to their plight effectively.
Government, we don't work under pressure. We have plans and these plans will be implemented. The issue of hunger in the nation, as government, through DMMU, we have done a VAC report, which will be launched by our Vice President in the coming weeks, which reviews the extent of the hunger situation in our nation. So trying to create pressure on government to declare national disaster before all the process are finished is uncalled for. And we have seen a named political party that has organized some international NGOs and local NGOs to try and paint a picture that people are dying of hunger in Southern Province. Far from it. In fact, it's not Southern Province that has been hit most by the climate change. Western Province is the most hit province in terms of hunger situation, and the government is controlling the systems that government has put in place. Every month, we allocate 100 metric tons of relief food to all the districts in Southern Province, in Western Province, part of Central, part of Eastern Province and Lusaka. This is what we are doing. So we'll continue to implement our program than using pressure to create a political mileage. So what is happening? They are stage managed, they are scheming to ensure that they create confusion that government has failed to look after its people. Far from it.
President Edgar Lungu has been advised to reduce the delegation as he heads to Japan on the 26th of August 2019. President Edgar Lungu is this week expected to leave the country to attend this year's Tokyo International Conference on African Development in Tokyo, Japan, which is aimed at enhancing trade and development between Africa and Japanese leaders. But the opposition Green Party leader, Peter Sinkamba, is concerned with the huge delegation team President Edgar Lungu takes with him each time he undertakes a trip outside the country. Mr. Sinkamba says with austerity measures in place, it is important that the head of state leads by example by reducing the number of delegates on his trip. He feels that there are a lot of unnecessary people in the name of advanced party who do not even contribute anything but instead drain national coffers.
But we don't think that we will need to carry the entire cabinet office to go and accompany the president. That's not right. He needs to emulate what the late President Mwanawasa did. I remember there was a time when President Mwanawasa was traveling for a summit in France, and on his way in London, he found there was a huge delegation of civil servants who had put themselves on the trip. He sent them back in London, and those who were already in France, he sent them back also. And from that point forward, he made sure that he had to look at the list of people that were going to attend the meetings, so that there's screening and eliminating relevant persons in the group. So really, it's sad that we are going to continue wasting public resources like that when everyone is being told that there's austerity here and the austerity measures are being followed or implemented. But from what we've seen, definitely there is, I think, a gap which needs to be filled up. I think the president needs to be on top of things and make sure that civil servants don't jump on the bandwagon and waste public resources in that manner.
The Zambia National Farmers Union, ZNFU, has opposed the government's decision to reintroduce price controls of the market. ZNFU Media and Public Relations Manager Kelvin Kalaye has disassociated itself says that the association has disassociated itself from such acts, saying the organization have always believed in a free market environment. Mr. Kalaye says that the union will not be part of the consultation process of the reintroduction of price controls of maize. He has told Q News in a statement that Zambia National Farmers Union is aware that the Agriculture Minister, Michael Katambo, met with stock feed producers, millers and traders who were threatened or coerced to impose the price of 130 kwacha per 50 kg bag of maize with full support of the Food Reserve Agency, FRA, which is the basis of price controls. Mr. Kalaye says that the union has however called for an urgent meeting of farmers this week to chart the way forward on the reintroduction of maize price control by government. Justice Minister Given Lubinda has urged stakeholders and citizens to submit their views and contributions towards the Constitution before it is tabled before Parliament. Mr. Lubinda notes that people are bringing out a lot of views about the Constitution in the wrong way rather than taking them to Parliamentary Select Committee. The Justice Minister states that making contributions to the Constitution will see progressive changes such as those that will help circumstantial children and pregnant inmates. Speaking when he attended Mass at the Good Shepherd Catholic Church in Kabata on the commemoration of the World Day for Prisoners, Mr. Lubinda stated that government is concerned about the welfare of prisoners in the country and more especially circumstantial children. He however states that the 2016 Constitution, which was shot down by some individuals, wanted to make provisions for circumstantial children to have a safer place to stay away from prison, as well as pregnant women to be allowed to be incarcerated in the confines of their homes. The Justice Minister has stressed the need for no one to think they are holier than the others, emphasizing that everyone is a potential prisoner and there is need for the welfare of prisoners to be looked into by all.
Instead of only allowing them to go and exchange their views in taverns, in markets, and bus stations, it is good for them to do that. It is good for them to go and share those views in small Christian communities. But it is even more important that those views are presented to their parliament. Let them go and make those views known to their parliament. If here at Good Shepherd, there are people willing to go to present their views to Parliament and they don't know where it is, yours truly will escort. Because we're hearing lots of views, but these views are only being said in the wrong places. If you are sick, you go to the hospital. You don't go to church. Yes, you go to church for spiritual healing. But if you have a wound, you don't go to the Father and say, Father, please, which he said. If you have views on the Constitution of Zambia, the place to go to is the National Assembly. And your Parliament has given us more time than ever before, from the 2nd of September to the 27th of September. All those who are championing causes, instead of saying, don't proceed with the Constitution, and you are saying it in a verse, please go to Parliament and tell parliamentarians, don't proceed with the Constitution. Your Parliament will listen. Your government will listen.
And Parish Priest Father Michael Mawelera has called on citizens to care for those in incarceration, especially the circumstantial children. Father Mawelera has encouraged Zambians to humble themselves both before man and God, as no one knows what the future holds.
We are just mosaics as far as God is concerned. because each one of us reflects God's goodness. Second, when we are being punished, maybe in culture, maybe when the people are trying to help us and it is very hard, remember, a good parent will always direct, sometimes very strongly, sometimes even punish, a daughter, a son who goes wrong because of love. I want my child to be useful in future. I want my citizens to be correct citizens of society. Thirdly, let us not waste words about wanting to enter the kingdom of God.
Government says that traditional ceremonies remain an integral part of Zambia's rich cultural heritage and should be preserved for the good of future generations. Chiefs and Traditional Affairs Minister Lawrence Chalwe says all traditional ceremonies are important to the people and the country because such events can be used as one of the vehicles for promoting unity in the country. Speaking during the meet, His Royal Highness Chief Bunda the 10th of the Soli-speaking people in Rufunsa district dubbed Know Your Chief and help him develop your chiefdom. Mrs. Chalwe says government attaches great importance to traditional ceremonies because it helps in the preservation and promotion of culture in the country. The minister has emphasized that traditional ceremonies are a critical part of the creative industry of Zambia with potential to contribute significantly to national development. Mrs. Chalwe says a nation without culture or tradition lacks the unique identity which differentiates it from other nations.
My humble appeal to you, ladies and gentlemen, is that let us put our heads together and positively contribute to the development of our great nation, Zambia. Invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, traditional ceremonies do not only remind us as a people about where we came from, but also, as alluded to, play an important role of fostering unity among the people, which is an essential prerequisite for facilitating sustainable national development. Tradition and culture is the core foundation on which each and every nation is built. A nation without culture or tradition lacks the unique identity which differentiates it from other nations. It is therefore important that we jealously and proudly guard our cultural heritage and use it as a vessel that offers us a unique identity as a nation, an identity that we can exploit and market to the world over for our social and economic benefit. My humble appeal.
And speaking at the same event, Chief Bunda the 10th of the Soli-speaking people has revealed that his chiefdom has embarked on land auditing exercise in order to help guide investment in various sectors of the economy in the chiefdom. And the chief has since pledged to work with the government in order to attract investment and spur social and economic development in the area. The traditional leader has also commended support for vulnerable children and active leaderships, vocal and other partners for their contributions towards infrastructure development taking place at the chief's main arena.
So we need to run these things in a transparent manner so that we become accountable to the people, because we are all interested to make sure that the welfare of each and every individual in the chiefdom is improved. It will not just start from that angle. We are going to start from even the people who be employed. The people who be employed, again, that it should be people from the same area, unless the skill which they are looking for is not there. That's when they can now set somewhere, and that one will not quarrel with them. But should they get something which we have, it will be a problem. Because we want our people to benefit. And we will come also to the issue of trying to see the council, when they are looking for land, they are interested in selling the plots. When they are selling the plots, we will also come in and share the plots to say, you, how many plots have you created? So we are also getting this number. When we sell, we will put the money into the Chiefdom Development Trust account. So if this money now is put into the Chiefdom Development Trust account, how is it going to be looked after? How is it going to be used? It will be used in different ways.
The Chibwela Kumishi traditional ceremony of the Soli-speaking people of Bunda Bunda district in Rufunsa district will be held on August 31st. And support for vulnerable children and active leadership, founder Eugene Amajona has pledged to continue supporting various traditional ceremonies in the country. Civil Society Agenda Siska chairperson Bishop John Mambo has criticized the President Edgar Lungu for what he described as too much talk and little action in fighting corruption in the country. Bishop Mambo has condemned the manner in which government is handling craft cases, claiming it emboldened suspects. He has insisted that the President has paid lip service to deal with corruption and has done nothing about punishing persons found guilty of corrupt practices in his administration. Bishop Mambo has advised the head of states not to be talking about corruption, but rather he should be seen doing actively by example.
We are not. It's lip service, a slogan. We just shout about it. Really what has happened is the biggest embarrassment ever. It's a joke in the world. You cannot. The whole world is laughing at us, whether we like it or not. We will redeem ourselves, but it's very sad. I moved personally, it's an embarrassment, because I know people who are innocent, who have been in trouble for no apparent reason. And here is evidence that is there. You are simply saying the system, there is none. I think that's a very sad setup. It's a dark hour for Zambia. We cannot claim to be fighting corruption. With the President directing the Minister of Home Affairs, when there are people employed, they are being paid by taxpayers' money, who should have found out the cause of the whole saga.
The opposition UPND has described the decision by the Indian government to donate about 1,000 metric tons of rice and 100 tons of milk to hunger-stricken areas in the country as an embarrassment. Recently, the Indian government donated 1,000 metric tons of rice and 100 tons of milk to hunger-stricken areas in Zambia. And commenting on the gesture by the Indian government, UPND Chairman for Rural Development and Reconstruction, Mona Mapani, tells QTV News that it is shameful for the government to receive a donation after exhibiting reluctance to declare the current hunger situation a national disaster. Mr. Mapani has stressed that accepting the donation from India is evidence enough for President Edgar Lungu to declare the hunger situation a national emergency so that other countries can come on board. Mr. Mapani has advised the government not to be ashamed to tell other countries about hunger situation in the country, but instead put the interest of the people first, as many Zambians are not able to buy 3 decent meals a day as per requirement.
And I want to believe it. The hesitance to declare is just because the UPND presidency took that position first. Now, do we have to wait until when somebody declares when people are dying? Should we wait to inform the people in government simply because we are in the opposition? The answer is not. The duty of the opposition is to offer checks and balances. And this is exactly what the UPND president did. And we are aware that he even advised the country that there will be El Nino and that the government should prepare enough or adequately so that the people of Zambia will have enough food around. But what did we see? Because it came from the opposition leader, what we saw was they started exporting the maize. And when they realized that, well, what we are doing is wrong, they want to halt the export. How would you hold something when we have already exported and the little that was in the country is gone? So I think it's high time our political leaders should start swallowing their pride and do what is required or what is right for the citizens.
Meanwhile, governance activist Leslie Chikuse has predicted that many Zambians will die of hunger if nothing is done to address the hunger situation facing the country.
What we need is well-wishers coming in and helping us to say, comrades, you are in this bad situation, so here is some food, here are some donations, and that is why it is important with immediate effect to declare Zambia currently as a national disaster, because it is highly poverty-stricken. That is what we are supposed to do. And we should not feel ashamed. It was just a few months ago when we thought that we had a lot of good climate, we also gave away food to DRC, we gave away food to Mozambique and so on. They did not laugh at us. No one was laughing at us. But today it's us who are in a bad situation, and people should laugh at us. Let us declare, let us save our people, let us preserve our people from the current suffering, so that when the so-called water is going to come, they will be alive.
The Movement for Multi-Party Democracy, MMD National Secretary Raphael Nakachinda has advised all those contending the current constitution refinement process to channel their time and energies to making positive contributions towards the amendment process through the Parliamentary Select Committee before it is tabled before Parliament. Mr. Nakachinda has noted that the country's constitution-making process for the past 50 years has been marred with propaganda politics, and there have always been sponsored groups with ulterior motives and agendas to fight the proper process of the constitution-making. He has, however, stated that the Patriotic Front PF government has demonstrated political will to undertake a constitution refinement-making process.
Our view as MMD is that Patriotic Front, under the leadership of President Edgar Lungu, has demonstrated political will to undertake reforms. Political will to undertake reforms in the sense that in 2014, 2015, when President Lungu was appointed Minister of Justice, his first remarks as Minister of Justice is that the draft constitution that seemed to have mysteriously gotten lost, he was going to find it, and it will see the last light of day in Parliament. And as misfortune would have it, he was eventually elected president after the demise of President Michael Sata. The first act of President Lungu during his inauguration was to appoint a Minister of Justice and given him clear mandate that we want to see a new constitution that will come as a result of wide consultation among the citizens of this country. And we had a new constitution, of course, which eventually was discovered to have lacunas. But even then, from the very moment there was a private member's motion in Parliament, he said we undertake constitutional reforms. And that is what is going on now. This opportunity we have as a country, we're not saying that the PF, President Lungu, is perfect, but the mere desire that let's work on the constitution is an opportunity that all of us must grab with both hands and work with it. And if you're going to think that tomorrow there will be another government and leadership that will be as committed to the constitution, we're cheating ourselves. I think those who are campaigning against this process must hold, their guns and hold their horses, and possibly channel their energies and intellect and wisdom on the process to make sure that they speak to the document. What is it they want to come out of?
Still in our news, the Electoral Commission of Zambia, ECZ, has been urged to stop asking people on how they can demarcate the constituencies, wards and polling stations, as doing so is a recipe for confusion. Lusaka-based politician Chris Chinda was commenting in reference to the recent incident which happened in Northwestern Province, where Lundas and Lovales fought during the delimitation exercise, which he believes could have been avoided. He says in order to avoid what happened in Zambezi district, it is important that the ECZ do its work without asking members of the public in areas where they are conducting the delimitation exercise to start debating the issue. Mr. Chinda says that this is because it is not the mandate of the Commission to demarcate constituencies, wards and polling districts. Delimitation is an operation of law which requires that ECZ routinely conduct the exercise within 10 years after the previous exercise, as contained in sub-Article 5 of Article 58, which guides.
It might not as bigger in white, but it's populated. So I think the exercise will also bring the leaders closer to the people in the constituency. What I would have wanted the ECZ to do, or perhaps the local government in conjunction with ECZ, I would have loved that they go in. It shouldn't have been a preserve of debate. We saw what happened in Zambezi, where tribes were fighting. I think this one, I think they should have just gone in and see how they can demarcate without asking people to debate about it, asking people to make submissions on how. But they should have just gone in and say that, okay, here Munadi, we are dividing it, it will be from here to there, like that. Because it's a benefit, the people are the ones that will benefit when they have their leaders closer to them. It might not as bigger in.
The Zambia National Education Coalition, ZULU, has called on the ministers of general education and higher education to immediately publish a communique on the education conference that was held earlier this year, at which important recommendations regarding the various solutions to challenges in the sector were made. ZULU Executive Director George Hamsunga has explained that upon realizing and acknowledging the poor quality of education in the country, government, through the two Ministries of Education, called for stakeholders meeting in January this year to get recommendations on how the quality education can be enhanced. Mr. Hamsunga further explains that a lot of stakeholders attended the meeting and made submissions as well as progressive recommendations, of which the two ministries assured that they would choose which submissions and recommendations will be prioritized and consequently published.
And the poor quality of education actually is acknowledged by the Ministry of Education and all the stakeholders in government, in the sense that in January of this year, they held a conference at which they wanted to transform the education sector, and they called stakeholders and informed us that indeed the education sector currently is not delivering the required learning outcomes, and we need to reform it. Now, that transformative agenda that they started, the agreement was that stakeholders would make submissions, which they did, and very progressive recommendations were made by various stakeholders who attended that conference. And we agreed that they would publish the priorities that we are going to implement as a country, as government, so that we can, all ensure that we transform our education system in order to have it deliver the required outcomes. And when we say required outcomes, we want to produce children who are skilled so that they don't look for employment when they go back to their villages. They are able to exploit the resources around to be able to earn income and contribute to national development. But unfortunately, to date, from January, we are still waiting for government to publish the recommendations made by the stakeholders that we need to put in an action plan that we need to implement as a country. So the fact that the quality of our education system is in dire stress now is something that we need to address.
And finally, in our news, Fisheries and Livestock Minister Professor Kanduluo says he will ensure that women and youths across the country benefit from the aquaculture development project. Government, with support from the African Development Bank, ADB, is developing the Aquaculture Enterprise Development Project, which aims at contributing to economic growth as well as enhancing food and nutrition security in Zambia through the increase of fish production in the country. Professor Luo has disclosed that her ministry is currently evaluating applications received for the project, of which she will ensure that most women and youths benefit.
They are evaluating the applications so that the successful people will be given the first tranche of money, and then we'll be looking at how we start increasing on the districts based on the success rate that will happen this time. And what I'll be looking out for myself is how many women have benefited and how many youths have benefited, because that's very important for me, because women are hard workers. The young people have a lot of energies, And I think it is important that if we didn't see a lot of interest from these two groups, we do a mass mobilization so that our young people, because we have a youth budge in the country, and a lot of youths are complaining that they are not employed. And this is one way of being employed, self-employment, and they'll be able to employ others. So once the technical staff finish the evaluation, I'll be looking at the percentages of how many women have succeeded, how many youths have succeeded, and if the numbers are not impressive, it means we must go back to the country and do a mass mobilization.
That's it from our news desk. It's bye-bye and God bless.